As I mentioned moments ago, Greg Whiteley is the director of the Netflix documentary on the Boston Red Sox, The Clubhouse, and he joins us now this morning. Hey, Greg.
Hey,
Hi. How you doing?
how are you?
Are you okay?
Good.
You all right over there?
Yes. Yeah, I'm still on West Coast time. I'm doing the best I can.
Oh, well, we appreciate it, and a lot of excitement, obviously, about the series. And I know you guys were there because we were there at spring training. How much total, when it comes to putting something like this together, how much total time did you guys spend with the Red Sox last season?
Well, we were there for all of spring training except for 1 week. So 5 of the 6 weeks? We reported when catchers and pitchers reported. And then we were there from opening day until the last game of the season, with the exception of 10 days in August. And then there were a couple of road trips that we stayed behind in Boston to film in Boston while the team was on the road.
Having obviously not seeing it yet, and like the rest of Red Sox Nation, will be able to binge starting today. Going into it, were you hoping that the Red Sox would advance farther than they did, or does content-wise, does it turn out for us as viewers better that they did not last season?
Well, I think in our style of filmmaking, it's really not predicated upon a team doing well or even doing poorly. It becomes, in our previous shows like Last Chance U or Cheer, it's really less about the wins and losses and more about these individual victories. And I think baseball is sort of uniquely suited for this style of filmmaking in that it pretends to be a team sport. It masks itself as a team sport when it's really an individual sport. And it doesn't mean that they don't act as a team and that the team isn't all pulling for one another. But baseball is made up of individual one-on-one moments where a pitcher faces a batter, et cetera. And the more you get to know these individuals as people away from the sport, it has this weird effect that I've noticed. Like, for instance, I was in a bowling alley the other night, and the TVs, they had TV screens. There was the Red Sox were playing. Jarren Duran was at bat, and I stopped everybody from that was part of our party from bowling, and we all gathered around to watch Jarren Duran bat because he felt like, at that point, he felt like family. We had to watch it, regardless of what the score of the game was or how close the game was. We wanted to see Jarren do well, and I think this series has that kind of effect on people.
Well, I did watch Last Chance U, and there was a lot of drama involved in there. How much of the behind the scenes or access were you given? Because last year was a year that wasn't very good. There was a lot going on with Alex Cora and a potentially new contract, trade deadline issues. So how much access are we going to be able to see to some of the things that weren't that might have been drama based?
Well, we had all access. We had unprecedented access to the clubhouse, to the manager's office, to the training room. We followed players home. We went on the road with them. We were in their hotel rooms. I would say, with the exception of a couple of managerial meetings in which we were asked to step out, and there were only a small handful, and a few trade deadline deals. We even had access to Craig Breslow's office and filmed him trying to prepare and negotiate his way through the trade deadline. And even I guess what I would call the brain trust room. It's probably got a different term, but it was where he would gather all of the key people. There was about 15 that would get together in a room, a war room, that would decide how the fate of their trade deadline. We were granted, there was a lot of that we weren't allowed to film, but there was a lot of it that we were. So Alex Cora being in a contract year, the team, struggling to hit 500, that really did not limit our access at all. I mean, just by way of an example, Alex Cora was amazing. It was very rare for him to ask us to step out of his office.
Were you guys present for the meeting at Breslow's home where the negotiation took place for Cora to extend his contract with the Red Sox?
No, it was actually, I think, no, we were not at that meeting. And I could see why we wouldn't be invited to that meeting. In fact, we didn't even know it was going on. We knew that negotiations were happening. We were privy actually to a couple of conversations that were happening between Alex and ownership, but we didn't get to film any of that.
And is John Henry a part of the series in any way?
He's not, except that we wouldn't have done it without him. He was the one. Him and Tom Werner approached us, and we laid out our terms in which we would do the documentary, in which we would need this unprecedented access, and that the Red Sox couldn't have any editorial control. And they were very supportive and very eager to do it.
Is there a player, from your perspective, that comes out at the end of this appearing different than you felt he would?
I think that always happens when we do this style of filmmaking, given the fact that I don't know any of these people before we begin filming. And I've learned over time that someone's public persona is almost always different than when you actually get to know them. And so whether it was Jarren Duran or Tristan Casas or Brian Bayo, it was, I was always surprised by what we were finding and the kind of people they were. I would say baseball players in general, I was sort of thinking we'd spend a lot of time filming them out on the town, partying. As naive as I was going into it, I thought baseball was a fairly laid-back sport. If there was a 7:00 game, I would have thought before we began filming, they probably showed up to the ballpark at around 4:30 or 5. These guys get in there 9 or 10 a.m. When there's a 7:00 game. During a 162 game schedule, there is so little downtime. I was shocked by that, and I was impressed with. Even if you were to take the most aloof and carefree player on a team, that person was absolutely dialed in on game days, focusing on rehabbing their body, watching tape, the hours and hours they would spend in a batting cage or in the bullpen, preparing and working and getting ready to do one thing, play baseball. And I think I've been impressed with that fact, and it kind of worried me. I think it requires a person that's almost obsessive compulsive to make it and thrive in the major leagues today.
Did Tristan Casas demand final edit on the entire series?
No, that will become, I think, abundantly clear when you watch the show.
Okay, all right.
Greg, you've brought up Jarren Duran a few times now. Obviously, he is a big talking point here in Boston with episode 4. When you guys start filming, do you film all players the same? Are there some players that are more into talking with you guys, or do you just follow certain storylines? Like, did you expect that Jarren Duran would be the main guy we're all talking about this morning?
Courtney, we feel like in the way that we like to tell stories, within the first, I would say, week, and maybe even faster than that, there's immediately a handful of players that we want to film, and that they want to be filmed. They want their story to be told. And it's not always the most outgoing people. Sometimes it's somebody shy and more reserved, but there's a kind of timing in their lives where they feel kind of ready, like, okay, I'm ready for my story to be told. And it's helpful for us to identify those people early on. Otherwise, you make the mistake of doing something somewhat superficial where you'll go a mile wide with 40 players versus a mile deep with 2 or 3.
Besides, obviously, the Jarren Duran stuff, moments that really stood out to you and that we should be looking for?
I think that, there's like a couple of places where you'll you'll see. Let me tell you one that I think was a fairly well reported on story. Abreu, his grandmother was dying. He's very close to his grandmother, and Alex Cora, being Alex Cora, knew this and was sort of counseling Abreu through this period of time in his life. And there's a moment in the game where it's a close game. It's going to come down to a single at bat, and Tyler O'Neill, who at the time was the hottest Red Sox hitter, was about to step in the batter's box, and Alex pulls T.O. and he puts in Abreu to pinch hit, and given the fact that it was a left-hander pitching, this was not something he would normally do. And so he was explaining in the dugout to an assistant coach and explaining to Tyler O'Neill, hey, this is what's going on. This is what's going on in Abreu's life. He explains his mother is dying. His grandmother is dying. And to me, not knowing what Alex Cora knows about baseball and what Alex knows about human beings, I would have thought, well, this poor guy's grandmother is dying. We should leave him on the bench. He should be given this time to deal with this and process this. We've got a baseball game to win. But he seemed to understand intrinsically there was something about Abreu. Now, during that period of time, we've been filming with Abreu's wife, who English is clearly a second language. She's never lived outside her home in Venezuela, and she's having to make her way in Boston and make new friends and figure that out. She's lonely, living away from family. So you now know this with Abreu as he's about to step in the batter's box, on top of the fact that his grandmother's dying. And that at bat, given our access, takes on a brand new meaning. And I would say that there's half a dozen to a dozen significant moments like that over the course of the 8-episode series, where the way that I would explain it is it's very much like you're let's say you're on a run. I was running past a ballpark the other day, a little league ballpark, and I just thought, I was tired. I'm gonna just rest and watch a little bit of this game. And it's boring. I don't know any of the kids, and it's little league. But if it's your kid that's playing in that little league game, suddenly that becomes the most interesting game, the most interesting sporting event of your whole week, maybe your whole month. And I think in this show, moments like Abreu stepping into the batter's box starts to feel like that.
Well, we can't wait to see it. And Greg Whiteley, we thank you for taking the time this morning to talk about the Clubhouse, a season with the Red Sox, and sounds like job well done. So thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me on.
Is there anything more perfect than John Henry and Tom Warner approaching a guy to cover all elements of his organization and then saying, accept us?
Well, maybe he didn't want them in it, Curtis.
Oh, yeah. You didn't want John Henry in it.
Maybe.
That is just so perfect.
I'm excited for it.
You are?
Yeah, I really am. And again, like I always say this, I've never been the biggest baseball fan,
right,
and I'm really looking forward to watching this.
All right.